A reading from the book of Tobit. I, Tobit, have walked all the days of my life on the paths of truth and righteousness. I performed many charitable works for my kinsmen and my people, who had been deported with me to Nineveh in Assyria. On our festival of Pentecost, the Feast of Weeks, a fine dinner was prepared for me, and I reclined to eat. The table was set for me, and when many different dishes were placed before me, I said to my son Tobiah, "My son, go out and try to find a poor man from among our kinsmen exiled here in Nineveh. If he is a sincere worshiper of God, bring him back with you, so that he can share this meal with me. Indeed, son, I shall wait for you to come back." Tobiah went out to look for some poor kinsman of ours. When he returned, he exclaimed, "Father!" I said to him, "What is it, son?" He answered, "Father, one of our people has been murdered. His body lies in the marketplace where he was just strangled." I sprang to my feet, leaving the dinner untouched, and I carried the dead man from the street and put him in one of the rooms, so that I might bury him after sunset. Returning to my own quarters, I washed myself and ate my food in sorrow. I was reminded of the oracle pronounced by the prophet Amos against Bethel. "All your festivals shall be turned into mourning, and all your songs into lamentation." And I wept. Then at sunset I went out, dug a grave, and buried him. The neighbors mocked me, saying to one another, "He is still not afraid. Once before he was hunted down for execution because of this very thing, yet now that he has scarcely escaped, here he is again burying the dead." The word of the Lord.
The responsorial psalm. The response is, "Blessed the man who fears the Lord." Blessed the man who fears the Lord, who greatly delights in his commands. His posterity shall be mighty upon the earth. The upright generation shall be blessed. Blessed the man who fears the Lord. His generosity shall endure forever. Light shines through the darkness for the upright. He is gracious and merciful and just. Blessed the man who fears the Lord. Well for the man who is gracious and lends, who conducts his affairs with justice. He shall never be moved. The just man shall be in everlasting remembrance. Blessed the man who fears the Lord.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Jesus began to speak to the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders in parables. A man planted a vineyard, put a hedge around it, dug a winepress, and built a tower. Then he leased it to tenant farmers and left on a journey. At the proper time, he sent a servant to the tenants to obtain from them some of the produce of the vineyard. But they seized him, beat him, and sent him away empty-handed. Again he sent them another servant, and that one they beat over the head and treated shamefully. He sent yet another whom they killed. So too many others. Some they beat, others they killed. He had one other to send, a beloved son. He sent him to them last of all, thinking, "They will respect my son." But those tenants said to one another, "This is the heir. Come, let us kill him, and the inheritance will be ours." So they seized him and killed him, and threw him out of the vineyard. What then will the owner of the vineyard do? He will come, put the tenants to death, and give the vineyard to others. Have you not read this scripture passage? The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. By the Lord has this been done, and it is wonderful in our eyes. They were seeking to arrest him, but they feared the crowd, for they realized that he had addressed the parable to them. So they left him and went away. The Gospel of the Lord.
The first reading comes from the book of Tobit, chapter 1, verse 3, and chapter 2, verses 1a to 8. Tobit is the story of a Jewish person who's living in exile. He lives in Nineveh, which is the capital of Assyria, and he tries to live a good religious life. On the Feast of Pentecost, when they're ready to sit down for the meal, he tells his son to go out and find some poor people so that they might share the meal with him. When his son comes back, he tells his father that a dead man is lying in the street and there's no one to bury him. Why is he lying in the street? He was probably executed by the Assyrians. So burying him will put Tobit in danger, because that would mean that he's burying a rebel against the Assyrians. He nevertheless goes out and he buries him. And all the neighbors make fun of him because he's putting his life in danger by doing these things. But Tobit is a righteous man. He does what is good, especially helping the poor and those who need his assistance. The Gospel is from Mark 12, 1-12. This is the story of the man who planted a vineyard, built a tower, dug a wine press, and leased it out to people. Well, when it was time for them to pay their rent, they refused to do it. And when the man sent servants, they treated them badly, they killed some. So he sent his only son, saying, "They'll respect my son." Instead, they say, "If we kill the son, then we'll have the vineyard." Now actually that makes no sense, because there's no way they're going to get the vineyard by killing the son. But it's just part of the parable story. And the intention is to point to Jesus being killed. He's killed in the vineyard and his body is thrown out. Now that little detail is very interesting, and Matthew and Luke, when they repeat this parable, change the detail. They have the son killed outside of the vineyard. Why? Because when Jesus died on the cross, he actually died outside of the city wall. Mark, who tends to give us the most original material, the oldest version of the story, has the son die inside the vineyard, which is probably the way that Jesus told the story. In telling it this way, it means that there's a small error in the story, a small mistake. Why is that important to us? Because it means that this story was told before the death and resurrection of Jesus. There are some theologians who say that Jesus never really predicted his passion, that these were words put into his mouth by the evangelist after the events. And this little mistake shows us that that's not true. If the story had been made up after the event, the evangelist would have gotten the story perfect. There would be no mistakes. The very fact that there's a mistake in the story shows that the story was told before the event. Jesus predicted his passion. He knew he was going to die for us, and he willingly accepted that. And the passage speaks about the stone rejected by the builders that's become the cornerstone. At one level, that represents Golgotha, which was a massive stone that was rejected by the builders, that became the cornerstone, the foundation stone for where the cross was laid, in one of the flaws of that huge stone. But it also refers to Jesus, who was the stone rejected by the builders, the prophet who was not accepted by the leaders of the Jews, who's become the foundation stone for something great and new. And may God bless us.